Hi, welcome to QuickLearn Office Hours, where the QuickLearn training staff answers questions from our students. My name is Rob Callaway. In this episode, I want to talk about a problem that a lot of students have, not just after class, but it comes up often during class as well. And it's a problem with tracking. We all recognize that tracking is an important part of any BizTalk Server solution, having that visibility to go back in time and look at what BizTalk Server has done previously. That's all very important to us. What's vexing to some people, however, is enabling the appropriate level of tracking to enable queries that enable me to find exactly the instance that I care about. Imagine a situation where I need to know the details of a particular order placed by a customer. Right? If that customer has given me, dozens or thousands of orders over the last 6 months, finding one and just the one that I care about, that can be a little bit problematic. And a lot of people, they don't know how to either build these queries, or more likely, they don't know how to enable tracking in such a way that that query is actually even possible. That's what I want us to look at in this video. Before we look at enabling this tracking, I want to take a quick exploration of the default tracking that's enabled without me selecting any additional options or anything like that for a particular BizTalk application. In this case, my application is relatively simple. Quick rundown here. I've got a receive port named new orders. That receive port has a single file-based receive location that I use to gobble up new orders. And then I have two send ports that are, in this case, delivering to the same output folder. This L demos tracking out. But we have a high value order and a low value order. Basically, we've got an order threshold. Anything over $10,000 is considered a high value order and goes down one path of our application. So a very simple application, should be easy for anybody with some BizTalk Server experience to understand. It's not the point of the demonstration. The point of the demonstration is tracking here. Now, if I come over here, I've got some sample messages. This wa.xml is an order for $2,000. So this should be a low value order. We see that it originates from a customer named Barney. So if I take Barney's order and copy that in, right, I get a low value order out the other side. I've got another order here from Fred. Fred is spending $700, so that Fred order, ca.xml, should be low value as well. And then lastly, we've got an order from Donald. Donald is placing a big order, $55,000. We'll go ahead and drop that on in as well. See that we get a high value output over there. Now, here's the deal. What if I wanted to be able to look up those orders, right? I want to be able to see, how many orders has Barney placed with me, in the last week, right? Or I need to, find any orders that are over 55 or over $10,000, or some query like that. Now, you might immediately be thinking to yourself, BAM could be a good answer to these questions. And yes, BAM is a great answer to a lot of these problems. But let's say I don't want to go through the effort of building BAM. I don't really need that whole reporting and charting and graphing. Really, I just want a query. So if somebody calls me and says, hey, I've got a customer that placed an order last week and I need to know what happened to it, I need to be able to pull that up, right? Give me the name of the customer, or give me the order number, and I'll pull up the details of that one individual instance and look at it. Now, I have the default level of tracking enabled currently. With that default tracking enabled, basically, I get events tracked. I'm going to be able to see the different events that have happened with these orders. I'm not going to get any data, however, which is going to prevent me from being able to build a query. Now, to look at the data that I do happen to have, I'm going to head over to the BizTalk Group Hub, and I've already got a tab open there. But if I come into the Group Hub and scroll down a little bit, there's a section here for tracked service instances on the left, and we've got tracked message events over on the right there. I'm going to drill into the service instances. This is going to show me complete instances that have processed, and it's showing me the 50 most recent instances here. Now, when we say service instance there, something to understand is that service instance is a complete service. For example, it's a complete XML receive pipeline instance. But that pipeline instance is made up of multiple events. There's a adapter got the message event. There's a pipeline started processing the message event. There's a pipeline completed processing the message event. There's a end of the port event when it publishes the message to the message box database and gives it to a subscriber, right? All of those are events that make up that XML receive pipeline instance. And if I right-click on that XML receive pipeline instance and look at the message flow, right, I can see those events stitched together into one big picture. I can see when this XML receive pipeline instance started, when it ended. Apparently it took absolutely 0 time. It's hard to believe, but in any case. All right, and then we can see our message events within the pipeline. The pipeline received the unparsed interchange, and then it spit out an order, right? There's our message type for the order. And we can see our subscriber for this message. If I click on that subscriber link, it'll take me over to an instance of the pass-through transmit pipeline. I can see how long it took to run, and I can see that this instance of the pass-through transmit pipeline ran in the high value orders file send port. So I'm getting some information here. The thing that's missing, that's really, really important about all of this, is there's no real data here. By that I mean I don't see anything with regard to the message itself. I can see what happened, but I'm unable to see the data that it happened to. We're going to need to increase the level of tracking that BizTalk Server is using in order to get that additional information. The suggested answer to the problem of building these queries is to promote some properties. I can essentially take values that are in the message body, promote them into the message context, and at that point, those custom promoted properties that I've defined are things that I can enable tracking on. Through that property tracking, I'm able to use those properties in the construction of the queries, as well as, of course, having that data captured for my reference later on. Let's take a look at how we're going to solve our problem here by creating promoted properties. In this case, I have my source code open. We have a schema for that purchase order that we were working with in that previous demo. And let's say that it's this customer name field that I want to be able to use in the construction of my queries. Now, I want to promote that customer name field. Now I have a property schema over here that I'm using for my message routing. I can just piggyback on this property schema. I might create a completely different property schema that I use for my tracking purposes. However, I want to just use the one that I already have. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and call this customer name as my property. And then over in my purchase order schema, I'm going to go ahead and promote that name attribute into the customer name property. Just like that, I now have those two things tied together. Now that's step one. I need to create those promoted properties. I'll go ahead and deploy our solution as well. With that deployed, over here in the administration console, we can start thinking about what additional information we want to track. As I said earlier, by default, BizTalk tracks events, but not necessarily any data. I need to enable some data tracking based on what I want to be able to see and how I want to construct these queries. Now, that tracking is going to be enabled in a couple of different places. One place that I'm going to focus on is the receive port. So as I get these new orders, maybe that's the point at which I want to gather this information. I could gather it from the send port, the receive port, even an orchestration. I just simply go to the tracking settings for that particular process. And on our receive port properties, we have the option to track message bodies, either as the start of the port or at the end of the port. Now in my case, I'm going to say, let's go ahead and grab those message bodies after the port runs. And then this is the really important thing. It's going to enable me to construct my queries. Let's track our properties. Okay. Now, there's something very important to understand here. When it comes to the message body tracking, BizTalk really doesn't discern what body it is. It doesn't care what schema you're using for those bodies. Any message that goes through this port successfully, we're going to grab a copy of the message body and we're going to save it to the tracking database. That's how that works. On the properties, though, it's a little more nuanced. With the property tracking, what we need to realize is the properties that are actually tracked are configured on the schema for the message body. Let's go and let's look at what that means. I'm opting in to track the properties here. Right? This is the event that I want to grab the tracked properties from. But what properties do I actually care about? That's configured in my schema. So I have my purchase order schema over here. That's the one that we created the promoted properties on earlier. Right? And in here I can say, you know what? I want to be able to track the customer name. If that's what I want to use in the construction of my query, I could simply choose to track the customer name. And now that customer name property actually becomes a column in the tracking database. Column that I can use for queries. I can do that for any one of my custom promoted properties. You might notice when I select all of them, we just say select all message properties. That's basically give me all of my custom properties, that checkbox there. And then at the top there, always track all properties. Now, this is a little misleading because it says always track all properties. Really, it's just track all properties. Track all properties when there's an event that says property tracking should happen. Now, the all properties that I'm tracking here is system properties, adapter properties, and of course, my custom promoted properties. All of the properties in the context of that BizTalk message are going to be tracked, at least if there's an event where property tracking is enabled. If I didn't first go to the receive port and opt into property tracking, this would mean nothing. All right, so now I've got the right level of tracking enabled, although you might make the argument that I'm tracking everything and maybe that's a little bit of overkill. In our case, for the demo, it's not overkill. It's exactly what we want. Now, of course, before I'm going to be able to see any of that data, we're going to have to submit a couple more messages in. So I forget here, Fred is California. Let's go ahead and, you know what? I don't even care. Let's go and let's drop in one more of each of our sample files. Now I want to go and construct that query that's going to enable me to see what's going on, right? See a particular message instance. Now what I want to do here is I want to just construct my own new query, right? There's some built-in queries that we could use to eventually get to what we care about. But I'm just going to go with a new query. Now this new query, I'm looking for not tracked service instances, but tracked message events. Now, I want you to think about it this way. I enable the data tracking on a particular event. I said track the message bodies at the end of the port. Track the message properties at the end of the port. There's an event that data is associated with, and those events are what I want to query for. So show me events where, this is the key to all of our tracking. I'm going to say where the schema name is purchase order. Now, because I had enabled tracking for the properties in that purchase order schema, when I drop down my list now, I can see the promoted properties that we had previously tracked. This is kind of interesting that, oh, you know what happened? I don't see the customer name. And this is totally unrelated and shouldn't really even be part of this demonstration, but I was just foolish and I forgot to restart my host instance after making that change. So the customer name property wasn't actually being promoted when we last ran. So I'm not going to be able to query based on the customer name because it hasn't been tracked. This is a good sign, though. This teaches us something, right? What we're learning here is the columns in the tracking database that I'm going to use for constructing these queries are based on those promoted properties. And if the promoted properties don't exist, then of course the columns don't exist. And you might make an argument that sometimes those promoted properties exist for one message and they don't exist for a different message. So we might want to think about and approach this in such a way that all of my messages are going to have the same properties, at least if it's something that I want to be able to key off of. All right, just for the sake of the demo, I'm going to go ahead and bounce that host instance. And after our host instance restarts, I'm going to go ahead and drop in another series of messages. All right, once those messages have successfully processed, looks all good over there, we're going to go ahead and head back over here and see. Sometimes this takes a little minute to refresh. There we go, customer name. I'm going to say, let's look for things where the customer name is. Oh, they tease me so bad. They give me a drop-down list, but the drop-down list isn't actually populated. I'm looking for messages where the customer name is Fred. All right, and I can see I have two events, remember events, where the customer name is Fred. Okay? Now, if we look at the actual service, we can see what those events are tied to. Right? One is the send event for the XML receipt. And when we say send event, we mean the pipeline sent the message to the message box database. Right? And we have the receive event for the pass-through transmit. So that's our send port getting the message from the message box database. The reason that I see both of these, I enabled my tracking on the receive, but I apparently have an event tied to the send. The reason that I'm seeing both of these is BizTalk is smart enough to understand the message that the receive publishes is the message that the send port subscribes to. Right, those two events are the same thing, the data is the same thing, so I'll show it to you as both of those things. All right, but in either case, I can right click on them and I can say show me the message details. And now I've got my body, because I chose to track the body, and I have all of our message context, system properties, adapter properties, and of course my custom promoted properties. All there for me to see. In case you didn't notice it, when I ran my query here looking for orders from Fred, all right, we also had the customer location, the customer name, the order total, the schema name. Right, a lot of those properties ended up being just columns in my query results. So I may not even need to drill all the way in to the message details and look at that message body or those message properties, depending on the columns that are returned when I run my query here. That's it for this episode of QuickLearn Office Hours. I hope this video has increased your understanding on how tracking works in BizTalk Server. If you're looking for additional learning options, you can check out our other QuickLearn Office Hour videos here, or come and attend one of our instructor-led courses. Promise that'll be a great time. For now, I'm Rob Callaway, and I'll see you next time on QuickLearn Office Hours.